Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 146.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Welcome. This is Keith Parsons. I'm with Wireless LAN Professionals, and today I'm with Lee Badman. Lee, how are you?
I'm doing well, Keith. How are you?
Good. This is Lee Badman of Wi-Fi Question of the Day fame. Thank you very much for that. That's a great thing to add into our community. So I just wanted to thank you, let everyone know that I think it's a fantastic thing. Do you plan on continuing with it moving forward?
I do. I mean, there's times where I think I don't have anything left to ask, but then it's nice that I get enough, input from other people saying, hey, I'm wondering about this, and can you ask that? And I get enough of that where when I'm having a mental dry spell, others carry me through. So at least for the foreseeable future, I'll keep going with it.
Well, I think it's a great thing. So please do keep it on. It gives me a chance to think at least once a day about something that I probably didn't think about prior. So thanks. Well, this session, I thought we could talk about, you did a post a while back about your training to be, what is it, Part 107 FAA certified.
I did indeed.
And so what was your impetus to go more than just a casual player, toy, get in the drone world and actually go out for your FAA certification?
So for me, it really, at the end of it, the drone thing, if you will, the go and get your certification from the FAA. The end game for all of that is generally to be able to fly drones in the furtherance of a business, to use the FAA's own language, and that business can be all kinds of different things. Typically, it's photography. I consider myself to be a photographer, albeit amateur. I have got paid for a couple of my pictures through the years, but you're generally doing photography for something. And I wasn't really sure where I wanted to take that, but I knew that it sounded kind of cool. I also, there's not a network certification that was tickling my fancy right now, but I just need to do something. And it just seemed like a good time to go down this road. I happen to have a bachelor's degree in aeronautics from many years ago, and just a whole bunch of things lined up. And I thought it would be kind of a cool thing to do and kind of, refamiliarize myself with a lot of that curriculum, and then also, learn about the other side of doing drone stuff, doing it for business, doing it responsibly, doing it within the confines of the law and regulations, and not just going out and being, another jerk with a quadcopter.
Well, in addition to being another jerk with a quadcopter.
Well, that too, yeah.
You'll be at least legal at it. So if someone wanted to just, they get a Mavic drone or something and they want to go play, what are the current laws state? What can you do with and without this FAA certification?
It's a great question. You're either going to fly with Part 107, and in that case, you're an airman in the FAA system, as grandiose as it sounds, but legally you are. If you don't go that route, you're a hobbyist. They both have some of the same rules. Once you get your Part 107 certification, you'll probably be a little bit surprised to find out on some levels it feels like hobbyist people actually have more leeway than you do in certain circumstances. But regardless, if you've got a drone or a UAS, if you will, the unmanned aircraft system is the FAA's term for all of this. If it's above a certain weight, 0.55 pounds, and below 55 pounds, you have to have it registered. Either way, whether you're a hobbyist or whether you're a certified UAS pilot, there's height restrictions. There's places that you absolutely cannot fly. There's places that you have to get permission to fly. Both of those apply to both paths of doing the drone thing. once you get the Part 107, some of the, hey, you can't just go fly here goes away, and you know where you should actually get permission before you go get yourself in trouble. Whereas the hobbyist stuff is a little more, um, a lot more room to get yourself in trouble because nobody has ever forced you to learn the fact that you're actually operating in the airspace system. You're actually part of where other aircraft and helicopters and big bigger drones that are being used for a variety of purposes operate. And without knowing that, like the hobbyists do, you can end up, you know, potentially getting yourself in a lot of trouble. So, the question is, what can you do? Or, without the 107, what can you do? Well, you can go fly and maybe get yourself in all all kinds of trouble. And if you don't get caught, have a good time along the way. I mean, it's kind of an odd paradigm right now. I'm personally at this point, having gone through the 107 thing and having flown, my drones around a lot by now, I'm really surprised that they're still selling them in the volume that they are, just because of the trouble you can get into with them. I'm surprised that they're still as unregulated as they are myself, for what it's worth.
Well, and one of the things with the Mavic that I've got from DJI is the software has limits that every time they change, flying restrictions are hard coded into the drone itself. I haven't run into those yet that it's actually stopped me from doing anything, but every time I update the software, it says, one of the features is that. So maybe they're selling them because they have, something hard coded in them. I don't know if yours has the same feature.
Actually, mine doesn't, but I know what you're talking about. I've gotten into a handful of professional drone forums, and that'll actually cause people consternation now and then, because as a 107 person, you're actually legal to go do what you're about to do. DJI in particular will restrict you because it knows by GPS location that you're somewhere where its database says you can't just go fly, and there's some process that you would go through DJI to essentially get whitelisted for that flight. So yeah, I mean, to your point, I guess it is good that it's being regulated from the manufacturer, and they're trying to help people stay out of trouble. But there is a bit of tension where, okay, I'm past that, or I feel like I should be past that, yet the manufacturer is still regulating me. And it's kind of a wide net that catches the hobbyists and the 107 people both when it comes from that end of it, if that makes sense.
That does. For so basically, if you needed to get your 107 if you wanted to charge money for your photography.
If you want to, it's not quite that cut and dry. If you want to charge for your photography, absolutely. If you are using it to do, point-to-point work and wireless, and you're surveying something that you will eventually be paid for, the point-to-point link, even though the drone, your use of the drone to get your own photography, even though you're not handing it off to anybody, you have used the drone in the furtherance of a business.
Man,
That would
you just caught.
there's a lot of legalese to it.
Yeah, so I've been doing some things that you just mentioned I should have had a 107 for, since I didn't actually charge for the photography, but there was some wireless point-to-point work involved. So they have a little broader net, that sounds like.
Yeah, and the truth is, it's like with the FCC. There's only so many regulators. There's only so many enforcers. If you're, my own opinion on it, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything stupid, but there's only so much enforcement to be had. And it's like with so many things, you can drive your entire life without having a driver's license, as long as you don't get caught doing something stupid, and nobody's ever going to be the wiser. It's one of those things where if you're, staying under the radar and, not making a big deal out of the things that you're doing, even if you're in violation, you're probably not going to get caught. I mean, that's just kind of, same paradigm that pervades a lot of activities that we do in the course of our adult lives.
But we should be following the rules if we can. So you decided to be 107 certified, and what was your process to prep for that?
I started with, it all starts and ends with the FAA. I went to their website. They have really good, you have to lose the word drone when you're dealing with the FAA, and you have to train your mind to think unmanned aerial systems. So you go to the FAA website, you look up the unmanned aircraft systems, and they'll have, becoming a pilot, and they'll walk you through the things that you're going to have to study, the objectives that you'll get tested on when you finally go to do your 107. So you start with the FAA, and you get, the absolute authority is telling you what you should be studying, and what you're expected to know, and it's pretty comprehensive. Pretty comprehensive. I was actually surprised all of the areas that were covered, and for me, it was a lot of fun to study. But once the FAA tells you this is what you need to study, from there you can go out and find all kinds of free or paid training. And then once you get through that, it'll come back to the FAA, because you'll go to an approved testing center and you'll take your exam, and ultimately your pilot certificate will be licensed by the FAA. So the FAA is at the beginning, it's at the end, and in the middle, there's all kinds of places where you can go to actually get practice tests, and where you can actually go to get, quote unquote, curriculum, or the knowledge that you need to pass the test.
And I've got on my desk here a couple FAA books that they actually publish, as well as the maps. I was surprised how much. I mean, having been through private pilot training a couple decades ago, they're treating you like you're a pilot.
I would agree. I started doing ground school way, way, way back when, and I didn't stick with it because I was also in the Air Force at the time, and I had other things competing for my meager paycheck, and those other things won out. But I did get far enough along, and then when I did my undergrad, to come back and recognize that what you're talking about, there's a lot there. It's basically, I've seen it described as, it's basically private pilot ground school, tweaked a little bit for the UAS thing. Now, I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I have seen it, described as that on more than one occasion. You're into weather, you're into aviation regulation, you're into airspace classifications, you're into things like crew resource management. If you don't know what that means, you'll learn once you start doing this. Radio procedures, airport operations. It's really a wide range. And, every now and then you catch yourself thinking, why do I got to learn all of this just to do drone operations? And if you think of it through the lens of, DJI and quadcopters and the consumer end of life, maybe it doesn't make sense. But then once you get your Part 107, and you join some of the forums for people that are doing this for a living, it starts to become clear why it's important to learn all of that, because there's a lot more to it than just flying DJIs around and taking pictures. This is it's really a big ecosystem, the whole UAS thing. And like I say, you have to kind of get into it a little bit, I think, for the need to know all of this stuff to make sense.
And
if that makes
you
sense.
went through this process on the free sites. You got FAA manuals. You went through and you listed in your website a whole bunch of supporting sites that you went through. Did you contemplate using any of the paid training?
I didn't, and the reason I didn't is because, first of all, the FAA does give you a lot of good material. It's the same material that those paid sites will reference. So, like the one big one is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. It's free PDF you can download right from the FAA's websites, and a whole bunch of other ones. A whole bunch of other documents you'll need are also available freely. When it comes to studying and it comes to learning, where I am in life, I've done a lot of it, so I felt comfortable that I'm experienced enough, both as a person who needs to study, and as somebody who's done a lot of giving of training. I felt disciplined enough that I could do it on my own, and I also set out and found what I thought was a couple of really good free sites that got me going to the point where I felt comfortable about not needing to go the paid route. At the same time, if you're not a self starter, if you're not a self motivator, if you absolutely need somebody teaching you, and there's no shame in that whatsoever, um, thankfully there are a lot of good paid resources to go that route too.
And they're quite inexpensive, especially compared to a like real pilot ground school. I think I've seen some anywhere from 100, 200, $300 kind of range. And if you are that you need that support, there's people there, and there's also those paid ones allow you to ask questions rather than sometimes when you do your own private stuff you get stuck with a question, just don't even know where to ask.
Yeah, and I'll freely give some credence to that point exactly. There are still things right up to the point where I took the test that were on the test where looking back at it, and as I sat there kind of, I don't want to say sweating bullets because that's dramatic, but a little bit nervous about, anytime you get hit with a test question, it throws you for a loop. I don't care, how long you've been taking tests, you still want to do your absolute best. And so you hit a question that stumps you and it makes you a little bit nervous. I will admit to being nervous maybe on half a dozen questions. And of those half a dozen, there's probably maybe two I still have no idea what they were talking about. Absolutely none. Even going back and trying to find, the essence of that question in the reference materials, and that sort of, that is one of the things you would get by having an instructor to interact with. It's like I just don't understand this point, but when I was doing self study, I hoped I'd never see it again, and lo and behold, I saw it again.
Right on the test.
Shame on me. Exactly.
Well, what are some of the things that like I'm in the midst of studying now, and I thought I knew a lot of the aircraft and the flight rules that from doing private pilot ground school, but the things I'd forgotten, there's a lot of questions, it looks like, on using sectional charts.
Yeah, the sectional charts can be really confusing. The sectional charts are probably among the most complicated maps that you will ever see anywhere, in my opinion. That kind of diagrams out the airspace system over a given region of the country, and it shows you what class airspace is around a certain airport. And you have to know what that means, if it's a class A or a class B or a C or a D. And what does that mean to you as a drone operator? And I won't give it all away, but in some of those, you are not going to fly in those circles, period. In others, you can ask for permission, and there's a process for getting a waiver, and because it's the government, it's not very fast. If there's work that you need to do within the circles surrounding an airport, other places you'll look at the circle. It's not always a circle, but I'm just kind of being lazy and generic here. You'll look at the circle around a airport more in a rural setting, and if you know how to read it, you know that you're good to a certain height, then you actually don't have to get permission. And it's that kind of nuance. And then there's the obstacles, that you're going to fly over, towers and mountains, and there's elevation changes, and you have to know, what does it mean when you're AGL, above ground level, versus mean sea level, and military operational areas, and other areas with special restrictions, and how to recognize if a given airport does um, uh, skydivers, and if there's a balloon tethered out in the middle of nowhere at 3,000 feet. It's really fascinating to be able to decode these very complicated charts. And if you're going to do the 107 thing, you cannot get away from them. You absolutely have to know them. And like I say, the deeper you get into it, especially after you test, and the more you see how real drone people, the work they do, it really becomes clear why these sectionals are so important, and you really do start to appreciate them.
I'm sure you have a sectional for around where you live and work. Was there anything you found in the sectional chart that you didn't actually know that existed in your area? Because we normally see things from the ground when we're driving or riding a bike or whatever. Did you find anything on the sectional in your area?
Yeah, probably the one thing that jumped right out at me, the more I look at them still, is I know, like I'm in Syracuse, New York. There's Syracuse Airport, and then Rochester has an airport, and Ithaca has its own. Those are what you expect. But just the sheer number of little rural airports and lesser airports, somewhere between the ones that you're familiar with and the ones that are grass strips, there's a whole bunch of other airports that, unless you're out hitting the pancake breakfast out in the countryside, you're never going to find them, but they're out there and they can influence where you can fly and how you can fly. But on top of that, the impact that helicopter pads, landing pads at hospitals have on things. And it's real easy to not even think about that. But as I sit here talking to you, I am within, I could throw a rock at 3 different hospitals, all with helicopter landing pads, and they really influence how I can fly a drone in my immediate area. The university has its own policies on it, and the city of Syracuse does. But if you were to strip all that away and just go back to what the FAA says you can do, those helicopter landing pads are airports, and they have an impact on what you can do. And it's not, it stretches out for a number of city blocks and a number of little grid squares, and it's a very intricate and complicated system. But to answer your question directly, just the sheer number of the airports and the ones like in places that you might not ever think about, like the hospitals.
Well, good. I'm sure it gave you another kind of view on the world around you. If someone else was thinking of doing the same thing, going to follow along on your path, of course they can go to your website and look at the post you did. Any personal recommendations you'd give if someone wanted to get 107 certified as well?
I would say absolutely start with Tony Northrup, and I mentioned that in the blog I wrote on how I got there. Tony Northrup is a photographer. He's got a great delivery style. He kind of, he'll take pot shots at the FAA for, why the hell do we have to know this? But then he'll make peace with it, and then he'll just walk you through it. And by the time he's done, he does kind of a video study guide. Like I say, he's so pleasant to listen to, and at least by my sense of humor and things that I consider like a good traits of somebody who's presenting. He just hits it all for me. He's just fun to listen to, and he'll, gave of his own time to walk you through, this is what they're going to cover. This is how you should test. This is when you set up your appointment. This is what to expect when you get there. So Tony Northrup will do this, I think it's like an hour and a half of end to end, walking you through some of the more challenging parts and giving you some legitimate instruction, and he'll give you enough of a roadmap where you can probably then say, okay, I can self-study this and then go do some of what I did. Or based on what Tony Northrup says, you'll say, okay, I'm in over my head. I should probably pay for a Part 107 ground school. But I would say, having done it, just start with him. It's an hour and a half or so of your time. It's an easy listen. And it'll really help ground you on the entire process, and then kind of give you the little voice in your head, will feed back to you whether it's something you think you can do on your own or whether you need to go get some paid help with
after you're done studying, you had to schedule a test and then go sit the test itself. Can you tell us about your experience there in you just take it at your local airport?
Yeah, so for me, I looked up the test centers, and I found one that was within 45-minute drive, and called down, made the appointment. Actually, I think there might not have been anybody there the first time I called. It's a flying club at the Ithaca International Airport.
Which means you can fly to Canada.
The two almost don't go together, Ithaca and International. But there's a flying club down there. I think I left a message. They called me back. I had it set up. They would have tested me the next day at this particular facility had I wanted to. And I gave myself 10 days to finish my studying, take the trip down. It was an excellent gentleman that I had. He's a regular, real deal pilot. And it turned out he had some military experience that overlapped with my own. He was there 15, 20 years ahead of me. But we had great conversation before the test. He put me completely at ease. A lot of paperwork, surprisingly. probably a solid 20 minutes worth of paperwork to be done as we talk. But like I say, he kind of made that part of just, something we got to get through, and, we can talk along the way. And it was very enjoyable. You pay your money, $150 fee, and you have to do that every 2 years. Right now, the FAA is talking about changing that, but right now it's a 2-year recertify. There is no quick way to recertify. You take another version of the same exam. Then he makes sure that the test proctor makes sure that you have nothing in your pockets, like a calculator or whatever, that goes over the rules of the exam. You sit down with the pilot's handbook of knowledge and a computer test station, and that's where that handbook of knowledge is where you have all your sectional charts that are referred to on the exam, and other bits of information you're going to get tested on. And you sit down and you have at it, and you tell them when you're done, and scoring is done on the spot, and you know where you stand, and then off you go. And the other part of it is, if you go this route, not everybody passes, and that becomes pretty clear when you see some of the forums. And it takes some people 2 or 3 times. Other people will say, oh, it's the easiest exam I've ever taken. I aced it, whatever. I know that I'll freely say I got an 85, and I put a lot of hours into studying. And I was actually surprised that I didn't do, I don't want to say better, because I did what I thought was pretty good, but still I was feeling kind of cocky with everything I have in my background, and I still did not, quote unquote, ace it myself, if that gives any perspective.
And what's the pass rate? I mean, what's the passing score?
Passing score is 70.
Well, 85 is quite acceptable then.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, though, you'll hear Tony Northrup, back to him. He kind of pokes fun at how easy it was, and maybe he's a genius and I'm not, or maybe he got an easier set of questions. I don't know, but I didn't think it was the gimme that he described it as. And in my blog, that's the one thing that I do mention, is I describe my experience with him. A great start, but I don't really agree with the cavalier, summary that it's an easy exam. I don't think it is. I think it's very passable, but I wouldn't call it easy.
Well, you've been through a lot of computer exams for networking, wireless. You're a CWNE now, so obviously you've taken a bunch of tests. How does it compare to, say, a CWNA or a CWAP test?
Well, right off the bat, it's all multiple choice. There are only 3 options for each question. So right off the bat, your chances get better, even if you're guessing. Usually one of the distractors is pretty obvious. So now you're down to 50-50 on the tough questions. And, all of that means, okay, it's structurally perhaps works in your favor. At the same time, the body of knowledge that you're responsible for is so wide, it almost makes up for the fact that there's only 3 answers to pick from for each question. I mean, I think you mentioned yourself, you're seeing just how much you're responsible to know as you do the 107. So really, really a wide breadth of material that they expect you to know as you do the as you head down this road. So it's hard to compare it directly to any of the technical things, but they've all got their own nuances, and you're a individual. You sit down, you're going to come away with your own impressions. But I thought it was very fair. I thought it was very achievable. At the same time, I did feel challenged. It did not feel like a gimme. I'm not a generally nervous person, but I had butterflies in the belly in a couple of spots when I was taking it. Get 2 or 3 that are challenging you in a row, and you start to wonder, you maybe start to doubt your own confidence. But at the same time, it's like walked away feeling pretty good. Wife and I went and got a ice cream sundae afterwards and celebrated.
Did you feel like you had enough time? Was it a time constraint, or they give you enough time to make it, that you didn't feel stressed over the time?
Certainly enough time. I think it was 2 hours or maybe 90 minutes. I'm usually a blitzkrieg test taker. I sit down and I just rip through it, and doesn't matter what it is. I do not like to hem and haw, and I don't like to sit there and overthink things. And it took me a good solid 60 minutes. I know that before I was done. But there is enough time, whether it's 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever. I felt like if you're prepared, you're going to have enough time. If you're not prepared and you just go into it cocky because you got bad messaging from somebody that you really don't have to study, you'll take the whole time and you'll come out of there with a 40.
And then you'll have to study.
And then you'll have to study and you'll have to pay $150 all over again.
Well, Lee, I sure appreciate you taking the time to be the leader in this and go out and attempt it first. I know a lot of people in our community are looking to do the same thing. Those who have drones that they play with and now want to, perhaps use it as a business. So your leadership has been nice. You went out there and did the groundbreaking for us. So I appreciate that.
Oh, well, thanks for taking notice, and pleasure to talk about. It's kind of a passion for me. So, it's one of those things that was really enjoyable to do, and I'm glad I got through it the first time. And had I not, did it the first time, I would have gone back and got it on the second. But hopefully I can help anybody who needs help along the way. So always around to field questions.
Did you have you been able to use this for a money making photography yet?
That's the funny thing. You go this route, you start getting your name out there, you find out that people actually want to use your services, and it's like, careful what you ask for, because finding that I don't have the time to do as much as people want. So I have used
Well,
it.
that's a good problem to have, man.
It's a good problem. Um, but yeah, like I say, there's a to be careful of what you ask for. That keeps coming to the tip of my tongue. I have been able to use it in a couple of established IT accounts that also wanted to do a little bit of stuff. I've done a little bit of roof inspection, a chimney inspection, which was a lot of fun. And then I've gotten, kind of pitches from, would have been a really nice job, at least 2 hours away, and another one at least 90 minutes away. And this would have been ongoing work. And they both would have paid fairly well. It's just, having a full-time day job and then having 2 or 3 or 4 side jobs. I just don't have the time to give some of these jobs what they need, because again, it's photography. It's, if your equipment doesn't act right, you have to rerun a mission because they're paying and they want what they want, and you've got to, live up to your scope of work and all of that. And then after you do the photography and the videoing, some of them want, post processing. They don't all. Some of them are happy with just raw pictures and videos. But you find out that it's not just about taking pictures and handing somebody a thumb drive. They want it to be highly produced, depending on the customer, and that can take you down roads that maybe you're not ready to go down. And it's eye-opening on a lot of levels. So all I would say is, if you get that far, um, I don't want to say pick and choose your jobs, but just know that all drone work is not the same. People have different expectations. Some of it is going to be, a quick hit. I'll pay you $50 to go, video this roof, or to go do this whatever, and it happens to be within 15-minute drive of where you live, and it's like all of that is simple and easy. Or somebody wants 6 weeks running before and after pictures of a work site, and there's these 5 types of shots that they want every single time, and they have to be absolutely perfect, or you're going to go reshoot it and this and that. And it can be very, very detail oriented, some of the projects, and others are just, give me what you can get. And obviously the detail oriented ones should pay better, but if you are not already in the mindset of being somebody who is capable and has the resources to do good video production, you might not want to take some of the work that you're going to get offered. It's very interesting. That's the only thing I can say is it's really, really neat, and it can take you a lot of places, and you have to keep your eyes open and your wits about you to not get in trouble. But it's also very, very fun.
Well, I think that's a great place to end on the very, very fun. I think a lot of us got started in drones just for the fun, and we've had a chance to talk to you now about the process to be FAA certified. So thanks for your time, Lee.
My pleasure, Keith. Thanks for having me.
10 Talks.
So my topic is deploying at scale. Really, a lot of this comes from my experience within LPV projects and within stadiums. I'm Chris Reed. You can hit me at the CM Reed on Twitter. Lead network engineer for BEI Networks. We're a services organization out of New Hampshire. I've been wired and wireless networking since 2009, and then really shifted into wireless specifically in right around 2011. And I've been the lead engineer for one college and 3 NFL stadiums for the deployments. I submitted the topic to Keith talking about scale and was thinking, yeah, these projects, these are the processes that I use within these large projects. But the more and more that I thought about it, the more and more I realized that those same processes are used at my small scale sites, that when I'm deploying 15 APs, the same methodologies are used because you want the same level of consistency, you want the same level of accuracy at large scale as you do small scale. So when I started to realize that the small scale worked too, I wanted to change the name of the topic. So we'll start there. The problem that we run into is that handcrafted does not work when you're talking even 15, when you're talking 15 or 1,000 APs. You've got, handcrafted doesn't work at scale when you've got 15 to 1,000 APs. You don't take an AP out of the box, you don't put it on your desk, you don't drop a label on it, you don't configure it, you don't throw it up with your ladder and then go back and do it again with another one. You want to create an assembly line. You want to break those down into small components, hand it off to a low voltage group. If you're lucky, that group is internal. If you're not, it's external. So you want to break those implementation processes down into smaller components. You want to make that assembly line because it's fast, because it's consistent, because it's accurate, and you can train junior resources on small, specific tasks that can be repeated. With our LPV projects, we really try to get everything into one spot. Is that we get it all into one area, we set up our assembly line and start to unbox the APs. The labeling and the scanning happens at the same time. The label always comes out of the spreadsheet document with the name at the same time that it's being scanned in. Do not, under any circumstances at that scale, allow for manual entry of MAC address or serial number. Anything that you need to key on to be able to configure, if it's manually entered, it will be wrong, and you're going to run into problems with it. You can also start to assemble at this stage as well. If you know you're only going to be using the ceiling mount grids, get rid of the other components of that. When it gets out into the field, you don't want anything for the installers that they don't need, and you can get rid of the trash all at one place. You can also, once you've got things named and you've got things labeled, you can group them into sections. In LPV projects, these may be individual sections within a stadium. It may be the suite areas. When you're talking campus, you may be grouping things into building to building. The advantage of that is again, letting the low voltage installer do what they want to do or do what they do best and take some of the decision making away. If you're only giving them the APs to pull from that are going in that section, they don't have to choose from 1,200 APs and 1,200 different antennas. They only get to choose from what's going in that area. It's much easier for them to make a good decision. The assembly's all in one spot. This is specific to an LPV project, and we've got enclosures there. The really cool thing about these enclosures is that we can mount the AP in the enclosure and mount it after the fact. So if you can do that, again, you get to have it all happen in one place. You get a single guy that knows how to mount them. You get a single guy that knows how to connect the antenna leads, and you can get as much done in this spot as you can before it moves out to the installers. So if you're doing directional antennas within the enclosure, If you can mount it with the directional antenna in there, set that angle there. That decision making doesn't have to happen in the field. It can happen at this spot where you get that point of quality control. You can walk through and you can look at those antenna angles before they go out. You can make sure that the right antenna is going to the right section before it gets out into the field. The image on the right, we've got them all assembled. There's APs and antennas in there. The boxes are labeled and they're grouped into sections. So they just grab a bundle of enclosures, walk out there. This was an underseat deployment, so there's section, row, and seat right on the enclosure. Someone doesn't even need to bring documentation with them for this specific setup. They just look at it, section, row, seat, drop it there, and bolt the enclosure in place. Everything's done for them except for connecting that patch. For things that aren't underseat and aren't as clear, your documentation is so important. You want to make it as clear as possible, and you want to give the installers only what they need. They don't need to know about the channels that you're using or the powers that you're setting on the radio within the spreadsheet. Just give them what they need. One really cool thing that we use specifically within our LPV projects, but it's pushing to others, is Visio can use a spreadsheet as an object database. So you can have an object on a Visio that represents an AP, and then you can do views and break down different views showing this object has this name and this antenna type at this angle. You can very quickly hand off different documentation to different people. If you can do mock-ups or drawings or anything to show them how these things are being deployed, do it. The one on the right, if you can't see it, it's got both the height and the angle. You can put the AP on there, you can put the antenna on there, make it easy to see. If you can do a walkthrough, do it. Anytime you can mark, and again, take that decision-making away from the guys in the field. If you can mark it, it's really easy for them to put it in the right spot. Installation is always the point of no return. You want to get a couple of APs up and ready to go, and you want to validate that installation before it goes further. If you can get 2 overheads in a section in place, do your testing, confirm your cell edge, and then let it go. If they've got 100 APs out that are all wrong, it's going to be really tough for you to try to convince them to go back and change it. If they've only done 2, you can fix things before things degrade. And on the configuration side, don't click through the GUI. Jake and Ryan had a great Python class to be able to configure these things that can reference your spreadsheet that you've already created. You can hire someone to create a little internal app to be able to do that. If you're doing 1,200 APs, 40 seconds per AP, it's going to take you 15 hours to configure them. And then you're going to get a call that they want the names changed. And you'll have to do it again. Script it when you can. The best money we ever paid was for the application that we used to script these. It's a nice graphic interface on the front. Not everyone needs to know Python, although they all should. And the most important piece of all of this is find partners that you trust, internal, external. If there is engaged and involved in this project and want the project to succeed as much as you do, it's going to be fun. If they don't, it's going to be awful. And that's my time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.